The cry of a baby split the sterile silence of the courtroom, a sound so out of place that Daniel froze where he stood. He had walked in prepared to face deaths, judgments, maybe accusations, but not this. A nurse whispered a name he had long buried, holding a bundle of soft blankets that moved and breathed. Daniel whispered, "No, this cannot be." His chest ached as if the walls had collapsed inward. The judge's voice thundered, declaring, "The child bears your blood." Every face turned to him, their stares piercing like arrows. Daniel's mind screamed denial, but his heart stumbled against the truth. The air felt heavy, suffocating, as if the walls of the courtroom themselves were closing in. The sound of the child's faint cry echoed like a haunting bell, leaving Daniel trembling, unable to move or speak, as though the world had shifted and broken beneath his feet. The courtroom still hummed with disbelief, though silence ruled. Daniel sat rigid, staring ahead, unable to blink. His lawyer whispered, "You must respond," but his throat closed. Every sound seemed distant, drowned by the baby's faint cry. A woman's whisper cut him deeper than the judge's words. Shame, he denied his own blood. Daniel's palms dampened, his heart hammered. His world once filled with careless freedom, now constricted to a single truth. He whispered, "I never asked for this." The words broke in his chest before escaping. The judge's gavel struck, sharp and echoing like thunder, sealing the verdict into his bones. Daniel's vision blurred as if fog covered the room. The nurse stood motionless, holding the child as though waiting for him. His lawyer urged, "Say something," but words abandoned him. He stared at the child, skin soft and face innocent, untouched by shame or judgment. He thought, "Why me? Why now?" He remembered fleeting moments of his past, choices made carelessly, promises broken. This child was the proof he could not outrun himself. The baby's cry no longer pierced him, it lingered, soft and steady, burrowing into his heart like a stubborn truth he wished to deny. The spectators' whispers carried weight heavier than the judge's gavel. Each murmur felt like a stone hurled at Daniel's chest. He tried to escape. One man muttered, "He thought he was free." Another hissed. Daniel clenched his jaw until it ached, eyes fixed on the wooden floor beneath him. He longed to stand, to run, to vanish from this suffocating theater of judgment. But the child's fragile whimper tethered him. His silence screamed louder than words, a confession he could not deny. The walls seemed to shrink closer, shadows deepening around him as the truth pressed harder against his trembling frame. The moment stretched unbearably. Every second a chain tightening around Daniel's throat. He wanted to scream he was innocent, but the blood test stripped away denial. The nurse's steady gaze burned with quiet insistence. The baby nestled peacefully, unaware of the storm it had unleashed. Daniel's voice cracked in his head, though his lips did not move. "This is not my life. I was not meant for this." The judge's voice echoed, firm and merciless. "You cannot escape responsibility." Daniel shut his eyes, but the child's cry returned, faint yet unrelenting, carving itself into his soul like a vow he could never erase. Daniel sat alone in his dim apartment that night, the silence heavy and suffocating. The city lights flickered through the blinds, casting broken stripes across his face. His reflection in the cracked mirror stared back, hollow-eyed, accusing. He whispered, "I am not ready." He saw in his own eyes the boy abandoned by his father years ago, the wound he thought had healed, now ripped open by the child's existence. Memories of nights spent alone, waiting for someone who never returned, surged into him. The thought that he might do the same to another soul crushed his chest. He pressed his palms against his face, trembling, the shame overwhelming him. The baby's faint cry echoed in his mind, refusing to let him bury it in silence. Morning arrived gray and unforgiving. Daniel walked through the city streets, the noise of traffic and chatter fading as his thoughts consumed him. He remembered his mother's words from long ago, never repeat his mistakes. Yet here he stood, accused of being the very man he despised. A stranger brushed past him, muttering, "Watch where you're going," but Daniel barely heard. He felt a hollow ache inside, like a wound without end. Every step forward felt heavy, as though chains bound his ankles. He whispered to himself, "How can I be enough for that child?" His heart clenched with fear, but beneath it, a strange flicker of longing stirred. He stopped at a quiet cafe, the smell of coffee grounding him, though his stomach churned. He sat at the corner table, watching families pass by outside. A young father lifted his daughter onto his shoulders, her laughter ringing like a melody Daniel had never known. His chest tightened. He remembered his own childhood, waiting for his absent father who never arrived. His jaw clenched, his hands trembled on the table. "I don't want to be him," Daniel muttered. The words spilled like a vow. The truth was clear. The child wasn't only a burden. It was a chance to break the cycle. But the weight of fear pulled him down, whispering that he might fail the same way. The walls of his mother's house still carried the scent of old wood and faded photographs. She was frail now, but her eyes still pierced with truth. "Daniel," she said softly, "you cannot run forever." He wanted to argue, to claim this burden wasn't his. Yet his chest constricted as he saw her weary face, the years she had carried him alone. Shame burned in him, knowing she once fought the same battle without help. "What if I fail?" Daniel whispered. His mother placed a trembling hand on his, voice steady. "You fail only when you leave." The words sank deep, unsettling him, both comfort and accusation entangled. That night, Daniel lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling. His chest rose with shallow breaths as the weight of the child pressed against his thoughts. He whispered to the empty air, "I can't abandon him." The silence answered, unyielding. Memories of his father's absence gnawed at him, carving guilt into his heart. Yet in the quiet came an image of the child's small hand reaching out, fragile yet insistent. Daniel clenched his fist, trembling. His fear had not vanished, but within it, a spark of resolve flickered. He was broken, unprepared, scarred. But the choice loomed clear: either walk away and repeat history, or face it and fight. The phone rang with a cold edge that cut through Daniel's restless night. His sister's voice spilled venom. "You've ruined us, Daniel. Everyone is talking." He gripped the receiver, throat tight, unable to answer. Her words lashed like a whip, dragging every ounce of shame to the surface. "Mother can't bear the whispers," she added, and his chest hollowed with guilt. He whispered, "I didn't ask for this," but the words felt weak even to himself. The line went dead, leaving silence heavy as stone. Daniel's hands trembled around the phone, the weight of rejection suffocating him. Family had turned cold, and the walls of his world pressed tighter, leaving him gasping for air. The next morning, Daniel stood outside Emily's apartment, his former partner. Her eyes, once warm, now hardened like stone. "You expect me to believe you'll be a father," she hissed, voice dripping with contempt. He tried to speak, but she cut him off. "You run from everything, Daniel." Her words pierced him more than the judge's verdict had. He saw in her expression not just anger, but disappointment sharp enough to break bone. He whispered, "I don't want to fail again." But Emily slammed the door, leaving him staring at peeling paint in silence. His heart pounded, his hope shrank, and rejection carved deeper lines into his face. At the bar that evening, his friend Mark turned away from him. "You think anyone wants to be seen with you now?" Mark muttered, shaking his head. Daniel stared at his glass, the amber liquid trembling in his hand. "I need someone to believe in me," he said, but the words fell flat. Mark's reply was cold. "Belief doesn't erase shame." Laughter echoed from other tables, though none of it was for him. Daniel's chest tightened as isolation closed in. He had always been reckless, always searching for escape, but now even escape denied him. The loneliness pressed against him like a crushing tide, unrelenting. Daniel found himself at the Child Services office, the walls pale and unforgiving. A caseworker leaned forward, voice clipped. "We must know your intentions." He felt the weight of every eye, the judgment simmering even here. I don't know, he admitted, his voice breaking. The woman's frown deepened, pen tapping against her clipboard, as though his hesitation sealed his fate. The silence in the room was suffocating, each second dragging him closer to failure. He longed to scream that he was more than his mistakes, yet the words stuck like thorns in his throat. His own fear was his greatest enemy, clawing at his resolve. That night, Daniel sat alone on the rooftop of his building, the city glowing beneath him. Cold wind pressed against his face, his hands gripping the edge of the concrete ledge. His mind screamed to let go of everything, to walk away, and bury the truth. But then, unbidden, he remembered the baby's tiny hand curling in the blanket. A fragile sound echoed in his head, soft but unrelenting. "I can't run forever," he whispered to the night sky. Tears blurred the lights below, streaks of gold and red melting into one. He felt broken, but somewhere in that fracture was a spark fighting not to die. Daniel returned to his mother's house searching for comfort, but her silence unsettled him. She sat at the kitchen table, hands trembling over a faded letter. Her eyes, usually firm, faltered as she whispered, "Daniel, there's something you were never told." His heart stopped, words caught in his throat. She pushed the letter toward him, her face pale as though carrying this secret had drained her for decades. His hands shook as he opened it, the ink blurred with age. His name was there, tied to a truth he did not yet understand. The air grew thick, pressing down as though the walls knew his world was about to break. The words on the page blurred as Daniel tried to process them. His mother's voice broke the silence. "That child is not who you think." His chest tightened, and he forced out, "What do you mean?" Her eyes filled with tears. "The truth was buried to protect you. The child belongs to someone closer than you know." Rage and confusion collided in him, every nerve igniting. "You lied to me?" His voice cracked. She lowered her gaze, unable to hold the storm in his eyes. The truth stood between them, fragile yet cruel, reshaping everything he thought was his to bear. The house grew suffocating with silence. Daniel stumbled back, knocking over a chair. His mother whispered, "It wasn't supposed to come out this way." His fists clenched, voice raw. "Whose child is it then?" She hesitated, then spoke with trembling lips. "Your brother's." The words split the air like thunder. Daniel's heart dropped, the truth slamming into him with merciless weight. His mind raced with images of betrayal, lies built over years. "You let me believe," he gasped, unable to finish. The ground felt unsteady, as though his entire life had been constructed on fragile glass, now shattering beneath his feet. The revelation carved through Daniel's chest like fire. His brother Michael entered the room, his eyes sharp, his stance defiant. "It's true," Michael said coldly. Daniel's voice trembled with fury. "You let me carry your burden?" Michael's jaw tightened. "You wouldn't understand." Their mother wept silently at the table, her hands covering her face. Daniel's breath came ragged, his body shaking with rage and betrayal. "That child, it's yours," he said, voice cracking like splintered wood. Michael's silence was answer enough, the weight of his guilt heavy in the air. The room felt like a battlefield, every word a blade. Daniel staggered back, chest heaving, eyes burning with tears. "You destroyed me with silence," he shouted, voice breaking. Michael's face was stone, but his eyes betrayed guilt. Their mother whispered, "I only wanted to protect you." Daniel shook his head, rage and grief colliding in waves. "Protect me? You chained me to lies," he said, trembling. The child's image filled his mind, innocent, unaware of the betrayal woven around his existence. He collapsed into a chair, head in his hands, gasping as the truth consumed him. The night outside pressed heavy against the windows, sealing the house in darkness. Daniel stormed into the courthouse once more, the walls echoing his footsteps like drums of war. The baby's future now hung in the balance, the truth threatening to undo every lie. Emily stood across the room, her arms folded, eyes blazing. "You can't take this on," she snapped. Daniel's voice cracked, but it carried fire. "I won't let him grow up like I did. Abandoned, lied to." The room pulsed with tension, every gaze fixed on the battlefield unfolding. Daniel's chest burned, fury mixing with desperation, his words raw with a pain no one could deny. For the first time, he no longer trembled, he stood. Michael entered, his presence heavy, his gaze sharp with denial. "That child is mine," he shouted, voice echoing like a hammer. Daniel turned, fury boiling. "Then claim him, Michael. Claim what you've hidden." Silence cut the air like a blade. Their mother wept softly in the corner, her shoulders shaking, guilt painting her face. The judge pounded the gavel. Enough. But the brothers' war raged louder than wood on wood. Daniel's voice broke with both rage and grief. "I carried your shame, and I will not let that child carry it too." His words struck like thunder, shattering the fragile mask Michael wore. Emily's voice cut through the chaos, her tone sharp with venom. "Neither of you deserves him." Daniel's heart twisted, her words tearing him open. He stepped forward, eyes locked on her. "I may not deserve him, but I will not abandon him." The crowd murmured, the whispers swelling like waves. Michael smirked bitterly, but the guilt in his eyes betrayed him. Daniel's chest heaved as he raised his voice, raw and unyielding. "I will not be what our father was. I will not vanish." The silence that followed felt like a storm held in the air, waiting to break. "I knew why it would break." The judge's gavel struck again, sharp and final. "This cannot continue," he declared, but Daniel stepped forward, chest heaving. His voice cracked. "This is not just about law. This is about blood, about truth." His words echoed through the chamber, cutting through every murmur. Michael's fists tightened, his jaw set, but his silence screamed his guilt. Daniel's mother whispered from the bench, "Please, stop." But Daniel's tears burned as he shouted, "I will not stop. That child will not grow up in lies like I did." The courtroom fell still, breathless, as if the very walls listened. Daniel collapsed to his knees in the center of the courtroom, his voice breaking into sobs. "I will not let him feel the emptiness I felt," he cried, words torn from the marrow of his soul. The baby's cry, faint but piercing, carried through the stillness as the nurse entered quietly, holding the child. Every face turned, silence gripping the room. Daniel lifted his head, eyes red, but voice steady now. "He will know who I am." The words hung heavy, unshakable, as though carved into stone. For the first time, Daniel was no longer broken. He was unyielding. The courthouse emptied, leaving Daniel standing alone in the echo of silence. His body felt heavy, but his heart burned with an unfamiliar steadiness. He whispered to himself, "It's not about me anymore." The wooden benches stood like silent witnesses to his vow. Outside, the world continued as if nothing had shifted, but inside him, everything had changed. For years he had been a man defined by escape, but now, escape was no longer an option. His reflection in the polished floor looked different. Older, scarred, but unbroken. For the first time, he saw a man who could bear the weight, even if it crushed him. Daniel walked the quiet streets toward his mother's house, the night air cool against his face. His mother waited on the porch, her frail frame outlined by the dim porch light. She looked at him, eyes filled with sorrow and pride, whispering, "You are stronger than him." Daniel hesitated, guilt tightening his chest, but her words wrapped around him like a fragile bandage. He sat beside her, their silence carrying decades of wounds. "I won't leave him," Daniel said finally, voice steady. She nodded, a tear sliding down her wrinkled cheek, knowing her son had chosen the path she once prayed for him. Inside the house, Daniel stood before the crib where the baby slept. The child's breaths were soft, steady, untouched by the storm swirling outside. Daniel's chest ached as he leaned closer, whispering, "I don't know how to do this, but I'll try." His hand hovered above the tiny blanket, afraid to touch, afraid to break something so pure. The baby stirred, one small hand curling into the air, brushing Daniel's fingers. His breath caught, tears blurring his vision. That simple touch shattered his fear more than any argument could. He realized the child was not his burden, but his chance to heal. The next morning, Daniel faced Michael outside the courthouse steps. The air was sharp with tension, but Daniel no longer trembled. Michael's eyes flickered with shame, his voice low. "I never meant for it to be this way." Daniel's jaw tightened, anger still raw, but his reply was steady. "You left me to carry your truth, and I nearly broke." Michael lowered his gaze, silence heavy between them. For the first time, Daniel did not shrink in his brother's shadow. He turned away, the weight still heavy but carried with purpose. Behind him, Michael's silence was not power anymore, it was defeat. Later that day, Daniel sat on the rooftop again, the city alive beneath him. But this time, the emptiness did not suffocate him. He whispered, "I can't erase the scars, but I can give him more than I had." His voice trembled, but hope threaded through each word. The wind brushed against his face, carrying away the weight of his silence. He closed his eyes, the image of the baby's small hand filling his mind. For the first time, he didn't feel like a man trapped by fate. He felt like one who had chosen. The storm had scarred him, but it had also remade him. The nursery was silent, except for the baby's gentle breaths. Daniel sat in the rocking chair, body slouched with exhaustion, but his eyes fixed on the fragile life before him. He whispered, "I was never ready for this, but maybe no one ever is." The words cracked but carried truth. His hands trembled as he reached for the child, holding him close for the first time without fear. The weight was small yet infinite. Tears streaked his face, but his lips curved into a fragile smile. He realized he no longer fought against the truth, he had surrendered to it. Emily appeared at the doorway, her arms folded, her gaze sharp, but uncertain. Daniel looked up, voice hoarse. "I don't expect forgiveness, only a chance." Emily's lips pressed together, her eyes flickering between bitterness and sorrow. For a long moment she said nothing, the silence heavier than any words. Finally she whispered, "If you walk away, he'll never know you tried." Daniel nodded slowly, clutching the baby tighter. Her presence was not forgiveness, but it was no longer condemnation. It was a wound left open, but one that might someday heal. The distance between them remained, but the child bridged it. The next morning, Daniel stood before his mother's grave, the cemetery damp with dew. His voice cracked as he whispered, "I will not leave him like I was left." His fingers brushed against the cold stone, the words carved into it a reminder of her sacrifices. The child slept quietly in his arms, small breaths steady against his chest. Daniel felt the weight of legacy pressing down, but it did not crush him, it strengthened him. For once, he did not feel like the abandoned boy. He felt like the man who could stop the cycle. The graveyard wind carried his vow into the sky. Back at the apartment, Daniel sat at the kitchen table. A single beam of sunlight cutting across the room. Bills, papers, and uncertainty still covered the surface, but his focus was only on the crib beside him. "I don't know what tomorrow brings," he whispered, "but you won't face it alone." His voice cracked, but the words carried weight stronger than steel. The baby stirred, a soft coo breaking the silence. Daniel exhaled, shoulders finally loosening. For the first time in years, the crushing weight of fear lifted slightly, replaced by a fragile thread of hope, strong enough to hold on to. That night, Daniel stood by the crib, staring down at the child. His voice lowered to a whisper. "They tried to bury me with lies, but you will know who I am." His throat tightened, but his tone was unshakable. He leaned closer, brushing a hand gently over the blanket, his tears falling silently. The baby shifted, lips parting in a soft sigh. Daniel closed his eyes, the weight of years dissolving into a vow. He knew scars would remain, but so would this moment. And when silence filled the room again, it was not emptiness, it was a promise.